Well, after a hectic start to the season, full of goals and excitement, it feels like things are just starting to settle down in the EFL Championship after a weekend where only a quarter of the teams in the league managed more than one goal and 5 teams drew a blank. As always, we're going to preview and predict the scores and encourage you to do exactly the same in the comments below. If you beat or match my overall score this weekend, you'll get a shout out when we return on Sunday to look ahead to another full midweek edition as the Championship season ramps up. Very quickly, before we go and look back at last weekend, a quick caveat to say that we are recording and releasing this on Wednesday, which is before Swansea City's Carabao Cup tie, so I can't factor that into the weekend predictions. But for now, let's go and have a look back at Matchweek 12, which was one full of frustration for me. All of the games I predicted to be 1-1 on Saturday ended up being 1-0. We were a goal out from getting perfect scores in 5 fixtures, but we did manage one for the Coventry City win against Watford by 3-1, and also picked up a point for the Ipswich win against West Brom, the Swansea win against Norwich, and a 1-1 draw between Hull and Charlton, where a lot of you got 3 points in stoppage time, thanks to Luton legend Luke Berry. A few crazy scores in there as well, none less than the Friday night game. But let's go and have a look at how the rest of you got on to compare with my 6 points, which was not the worst total of the week, but was frustrating, and I was just beaten by a lot of people. So first, level with me on 6 was Mitchell, one of our regular players. 1 above on 7 are both Port and Keno. On 8, we've got Steve, Ojo and Marco. Then we get to the most popular score of the week, where Sam, Tio, Etienne, Nathan, Mick and Brian were all on 9 before the top 5 made it to double figures. 2 of you in joint 4th on 10 points, Chris and Isaac. And in the top 3 as follows: Tony, 3rd place, 11 points, a great effort from you. Nigel, regular player, in 2nd place on 12. And not for the first time this season, flying in double figures is Sven, our winner for match week 12 with 14 points at the top of the tree. An exceptional effort from you, but now we've got to try and do better than you as we look ahead to match week 13. And we start with a team I actually watched last night on stream. It is Wrexham versus Coventry. I did feel a little bit for Wrexham in terms of the scheduling, because to have your Carabao Cup tie on Tuesday and then a Friday night football, there are so many teams not in the Cup that you could have picked for Friday night. But still, that's the one downside, I guess, of picking the fixtures 3, 4, 5 months in advance for TV. But Wrexham, they were really poor against Cardiff, actually. They didn't play well. They had to rotate a bit, of course, and look slightly better when some of the bigger hitters came on. But it really wasn't a great performance defensively in particular, when it looked really open after a few slightly better weeks in the Championship. And to be fair to them, the Middlesbrough game last weekend, they were really solid. It was a 1-1 draw. They got the goal early. And yes, they'll be disappointed to have conceded late in the game, but they were just sort of clinging on. They gave up possession. They didn't create much themselves, but very much played to be cautious after the 1-0 lead. And in the end, a very good point away to the team second in the division, backing up a win against Oxford, which was crucial the week before. I actually feel Wrexham have grown into the division and will be very comfortably solid this year. For Coventry, it's just like watching a steam train at the minute. They're winning every week. They're scoring goals for fun. Yes, the last 2 weeks they've conceded goals, which will be a frustration. Gave away a penalty to Watford in this one, and maybe weren't as impressive at 3-0 and against 10 men. But going forward, they just look fantastic. They've got so many good attacking players at the club, and they're ruthless at the minute. Whether it's Thomas Asante, whether it's Wright, Sims, Allen, Sakamoto, various others as well. There's people delivering. And while they didn't have loads of chances, it wasn't one of those games where they went and opened teams up 15, 20 times. And actually, probably looked a bit more vulnerable defensively than they have at other times. A couple of great saves from the keeper. They had 3 shots on target and scored them all. And it's another good win. It's a team in confident form. They're going away on a Friday night. Long trip. It's going to be interesting to see how they get on. I actually think this game will be probably a bit tighter than most people expect. Wrexham have shored things up a little in league fixtures recently, and I think they'll almost set up as the away team here. But I do think we have to back Coventry to win. It would be foolish not to the way they're going. I'm going to go for a narrow victory for the visitors by 2-1 on Friday night. Let's move on to the remaining 11 games on Saturday, starting with the first of 3 early kickoffs between 2 sides that probably won't be that happy at the moment. It is Leicester City versus Blackburn Rovers. Leicester returning home after back-to-back away defeats against Hull and Millwall. 1-0 at the weekend, of course, against Millwall. Conceded on the stroke of half-time, a really awful time to let one in. And didn't really create anything clear-cut. Again, we're asking who's going to put the ball in the net regularly this season. And I still don't think we've got our answer there. But Only one win in a very long time now. Lots of draws before them 2 defeats and only that 1 win at Swansea. They're having a similar problem to the likes of Southampton where they just can't convert draws into victories, can't score goals regularly. And when you combine that with a bit of frailty at the back and not being able to keep clean sheets, not the best combination, is it? For Blackburn, a real relief against Southampton, finally ending a winless run, moving out of the relegation zone, turned it around late on after, let's be honest, not being the better side for the first half, but in the second, they attacked, they were aggressive, it was what we were waiting for, and in the end, they put the pressure on and got the 2 goals, did really well to show fighting spirit, and that's the thing you ask when a team's struggling, are they backing their manager, are they fighting to get back into games, how do they react when they go behind? And this time they reacted really well. So maybe a springboard to do something more, but we know Blackburn away from home generally aren't brilliant, albeit in recent weeks they've had a couple of tough games at Coventry and Charlton, who are both doing really well in the top 6 at the moment. So it's going to be another difficult one to call because neither of these sides have been hugely prolific. Leicester have generally been okay at home, but they've given up some silly draws. A lot of people, I think, will go for a 1-1 draw here, given the recent form. I'm going to go for Leicester to nick an ugly game. I'm going to go by 1-0. As we move on to a manager who is surely clinging on by a thread now. 5 defeats in a row for Norwich City, who host Hull City at Carrow Road. Hull doing very well, which doesn't help them. They're unbeaten in 5. And albeit there will be some frustration they didn't make it 4 wins in a row last weekend, I don't think they can be too disappointed overall. A 1-1 draw against Charlton. I've seen plenty of late Luke Berry goals. I wouldn't get too worried about that. It was a fairly even game. Charlton maybe just had the better chances. But look, in fairness, for where people expected Hull to be, they've been far better than that. They're still a problem defensively. They're conceding goals. But they look a threat. They're playing some nice football. And they're a decent watch, which is exactly what the owner wants, I think. For Norwich, though, 2 goals scored in the last 5. They're conceding goals again. And away at Swansea, they somehow found a way to lose it. They played pretty okay first half. They were relatively solid. They had the best chance of the match. But every time they're defending, they look like conceding. And Swansea are a side that this season, they've been fairly solid, but they've not created many chances. Despite only giving up 3 shots on target, Norwich have managed to concede 2 and lose the game. And they just seem to be a team really bereft of confidence at the minute. And I don't know whether that's just a managerial thing. We mentioned in the summer, key players had moved on, experienced championship players had moved on, and they've signed a lot of younger players who maybe haven't got that knowledge and that experience at this level. Is that something that's proving costly? Well, either way, it's got to be sorted soon because Norwich are in the relegation zone and they're looking in real danger at the minute with other teams starting to pick up. For this game, I think we're going to see... Well, we have to see an aggressive one from Norwich. It's a last chance saloon for Liam Manning. There's a week to the international break. And if they don't pick up a win in the next week, he'll be gone then at the very latest. So they've got to be aggressive. They've got to go for it. And that means Hull will have chances because they look a real threat in front of goal this year. They're not great at the back, though. So I'm going to go for a surprise thriller in this one. I can't split these 2. I'm going 2 goals apiece. And the final early kickoff is West Bromwich Albion versus Sheffield Wednesday. A little bit of pressure finally hitting Ryan Mason now after a pretty slow last few weeks. Only 1 win in their last 4 and 3 defeats as they went away to Ipswich and lost by a 0-0. A few criticising the style of play, but I think early in a championship season, that's a bit too soon. It's a new manager, a new look team, and they were only beaten by a late goal against a very decent side on the road. Yes, it is a worry that they only had 1 shot on target. Ipswich had enough chances to win 2 or 3 matches there. But defensively, they had been pretty solid for the most part this season. And maybe that's the biggest concern of the last few weeks, that they're starting to concede goals. 7 in 4 now, and 3 of those leading to defeats as well. They've always been a bit problematic in front of goal. Even under Carlos Corberán, when they were flying high in the top 6, they were still winning games 1-0, 2-0. They weren't going and scoring 3s and 4s. But that's going to be the challenge against Sheffield Wednesday, who, by the way, let's not worry about the fact they lost to Oxford for now. What a brilliant scene at Hillsborough. Fans galore, nearly 30,000 in total. Look, they're probably not going to survive this year now on -6 points. We did the little administration special discussion on Friday. But if they go down to League One, but they've got a sustainable owner, they've got a club that can run for the future, and the fans can focus on supporting the football team again, it's a small price to pay in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of big clubs that have been in that position before. They did fight back, having gone 2-0 down. They actually played quite well in the end, but just not quite good enough. They've not got enough squad depth. They've not got enough quality. Unfortunately, it cost them there. So a very difficult one for Sheffield Wednesday, this. I wouldn't expect them to go to West Brom and pick anything up. The pressure is going to be on the home side, though, and it could get a little bit tense if they're able to hold on for half an hour or so. Will West Brom be able to take advantage? Look, at home, they've generally been able to be fairly solid. So I'm going to go for them to nick this game by 2-0 at home at Sheffield Wednesday. Let's move on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs and two sides that were beaten by 1-0 last weekend. It is Birmingham City versus Portsmouth. Back-to-back defeats at home for Pompey. Not a good sign against Coventry and Stoke City. Really looking a little bit poor for them at the moment. It's where there was such a stronghold for them last season. But in this one, with 20 minutes to go, the own goal a little unfortunate. And you've got to be fair and say, while it wasn't a blistering display, Pompey did have the best chances of that matches. And on another date, they would have scored one or two. But equally, that's a concern as well, because they were scoring lots of goals at home last season. Just not quite hit form yet when it comes to that. But a couple of their home games have been against the tougher sides in the division. They've already played both of the top two there. But now they've got to pick up points on the road or risk falling into trouble. And Birmingham City, while they lost on the weekend against Bristol City, the one before against Preston, they picked up a win. They are a side involved in a lot of tight games at the moment, not really found their form. It was a terrible game, the Bristol City-Birmingham one. Birmingham, again, we asked this question before. A lot of the ball, 70% of it, but don't look like scoring a lot of the time. It is possession for possession's sake. And we've seen similar things early in other managers' spells, and some haven't been able to rectify it. So it will be very intriguing to see how Birmingham get on in the next few weeks, because the first few games of the season, they look really exciting, but it does seem that teams have figured out how to play against them now. So for this game, I'm going to go low scoring. Pompey are very rarely good on the road, so I think if anyone's going to nick it, it's probably Birmingham. There's a temptation to go for a 0-0 here. I'm going to go for 1-0 to the home side. As we reach the halfway point with manager versus former apprentice, it is Charlton Athletic versus Swansea City. Alan Sheehan was Luton captain and then Luton coach underneath Nathan Jones before, and he'll be very relieved to have got a 2-1 win against Norwich City last weekend. Just edges them back in towards that mix for the top half. And to be fair to them, they've not been particularly exciting this season, but they're building a solid base. It's all about the initial foundations, and they're getting there. Against Norwich, they weren't brilliant. They're still not creating an awful lot, but defensively, fairly solid for the most part. They did manage to nick the win, though. And in Viboknik, they've got a very good player. So hopefully they can build on that. For Charlton Athletic, they've done what Nathan Jones teams do. They weren't great against Hull. They did have probably the best chances of the match. But Luke Berry, I've seen it so many times at Luton, off the bench, popping up with a late goal and rescuing a point for the team, which after back-to-back wins is an incredibly important one, just to keep the momentum, the unbeaten run going, to keep them in the top 6, which is an incredible start to the season. Charlton Athletic doing really well, and 7 points from the week, no mean feat at all. For this game, again, I think it's going to be low scoring. Charlton at home have been relatively robust. They don't concede many, and they generally win games. Swansea on the road, look, to be honest, their last couple of away games, they've done all right. The 0-0 at Southampton, where on another day they could have lost, and they nicked one at Blackburn. But it's been mixed form for them. They've been a mixed bag, and I'm not as trusting of them as I am Charlton Athletic. So I'm going to go for Charlton to get a 1-0 win, maybe score fairly early, and then stifle the opposition. Into the second half, it is Oxford United versus Millwall, two teams that had a very good weekend last time out. For Millwall, the train is in full flow, 4 victories in a row, 3 of them with clean sheets, and of course all of those at home, but also got that big win away at QPR. I put Millwall to sneak into my top 6 this year, and I got a bit of stick for it. I'm starting to believe now they're playing really well. And to be honest, the way the season started, there might even be more up for grabs. They've got a lot of quality in attacking areas, which is something that Alex Neil has added, and now they've refound their defensive solidity. It's starting to look really good for them. They come up against an Oxford side who did get that crucial home win against Derby a couple of weeks ago, and then won that away game at Sheffield Wednesday last week, where you've got to give them credit. They dealt with the atmosphere. They dealt with a really excited and jubilant Hillsborough, and they sort of put the dampener on it on the football side of things. Really important results for them. To win 2 out of 3 probably would have been their target with the games they had last week, and they managed to do so. So Gary Rowett, again, just finding a way to do enough. Millwall are a very good side. But there is the odd clanger result in there. They had their frustration away at Swansea against a solid side before, and I feel Oxford will probably try and frustrate them too. It's going to come down ultimately to how Oxford defend those crosses, the set pieces, how they defend the centre of their box. But if they can do that well, I'm going to bank on them to nick a surprise point here, and I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline for the first time today. 1 goal apiece between Oxford and Millwall. As our next game sees two teams separated by just a couple of points in the middle of the table, but had differing weekends last time around. It is Queen's Park Rangers versus Ipswich Town. Let's start with the visitors, who got a crucial win at home to West Brom. Wasn't a brilliant performance, but they did create enough chances to win a couple of games. Probably should have scored 2 or 3, but Jack Clarke is starting to look a hero at the minute, and they are starting to rely on their wingers, people like Philogene and Clark, a lot more than the strikers at the moment. But a crucial win. And you know what? For all of the poor performances Ipswich have had, they're staying in the mix at the moment. Just 3 points off the playoffs, which at this stage of the season is crucial. And after those disappointing defeats against Middlesbrough and Charlton, really important they bounced back. So at home, they've picked up a couple of key victories, but on the road this season, they've been awful. And they go to a QPR side who, yes, have lost 2 of their last 3, and yes, have had their own struggles at home, but have found generally a bit of consistency. And Julian Stefan, he's not got the natural goal scorers there, bar Kone. It seems like Kone has to deliver or they struggle. And they did that against Derby, to be fair. They struggled to a 1-0 defeat. They conceded early and they couldn't find a way back into the game. But they're picking up odd wins here and there. They're starting to build a foundation. And the one key thing, which we always say with new managers, is can you see the identity? Can you see what they're trying to do? And with QPR, at least you can see that. And while it's not working every time at the minute, there's certainly signs for the future there. A much more solid season than we've seen in previous ones. It's going to be a tough game to call this, actually, but I just can't bank on Ipswich to win an away game this season. They've been so poor at the moment. I'm going to go for QPR to nick this game. And I'm going to go for a couple more goals in this one. I was going to go 1-0 yet again, but let's go by 2-1. 4 to go, and we move on to a side that had back-to-back wins against one that, well, we'll be wondering how they haven't had 3 in a row. It is Sheffield United versus Derby. It was all looking so good for Sheffield United, wasn't it? 2 wins in a row before the weekend. 2-0 up at Preston on Friday night after 15 minutes. They were in control, they were comfortable, they were keeping possession, but then they did the crucial thing. They conceded on the stroke of half-time and then fell apart after the break, and probably fitting for them that Daniel Jebberson was the man who got the winner against them. We've discussed it countless times with the players they've signed and the players they've got in the club. And for Sheffield United, compared to what Chris Wilder had last season with the likes of Robinson, Armour, Hodzic, etc., they've just not got the same level of defence, so they're always going to be susceptible. What we are starting to see, though, is the defence we expected from Derby after that chaotic start to the season. They've conceded just 4 in their last 6 games, and they win 2 games with back-to-back clean sheets and 1-0 victories at home. That's the Derby County and the John Eustace we were expecting. Not the best style of play, but solid, with Carlton Morris getting yet another goal for them in this one. They restricted QPR really well, and in fairness, while they didn't have loads of opportunities, Derby, they did have 2 or 3 brilliant ones, and on another day, could have got a quite comfortable win in that match. But look, I'm really impressed with what they're doing. And I said it at the start of the season, Derby just need to have a solid year. They don't need to be pretty. They don't need to be brilliant. They need to let John Eustace build stability at the club. We saw him do it at Birmingham. But the question mark over Derby, and to be fair, over John Eustace in his whole managerial career, has always been away from home. What are they going to be able to do? Sheffield United, despite the blip last week, are starting to look a little bit better, starting to look a little more creative. It is going to come down to how they defend, and I think they will concede one. I've just got a funny feeling, despite Derby's better defensive record recently, I'm going to go for Sheffield United to win this one. My surprise of the weekend by 3-1. We approach the final quarter with a man under big pressure because it is Southampton versus Preston North End, and we'll start with a home team this time. No win in 4 for Southampton, and they've played Derby, Swansea, Bristol City and Blackburn. 3 of those sides expected in the bottom half, 2 of them currently in the bottom thirds. And against Blackburn, it's another same old story. We've said this with Southampton all season. Defensively, they look so vulnerable. And for 2 games in a row to go ahead and look so positive at the start, you have to question the reaction when they concede a goal. They came under pressure late against Blackburn and just completely fell under. Against Bristol City, it was disgraceful, some of the defending. Look, there's got to be a little bit more solidity here. And it's maybe picking a slightly different option at wing-back. The combination in midfield, which I still don't think is right for Southampton at the moment. And until those things are addressed, they're going to keep struggling because, look, the one thing we were saying in recent weeks is at least they're not losing many. They look like winning and then drawing a game. Now they're looking like drawing and they're losing them, which is even worse. They're 3 points off the relegation zone. They're 16 points off the top of the table, which, let's be honest, was the aim for the season. And they're coming up against a Preston side who have had a really decent start. They're quite hard to beat. They're actually a bit more entertaining than we thought. And even from 2 goals down, we've seen a team with a very different character. A late goal in the first half against Sheffield United, and then in the second half, they came flying out of the traps. And we're seeing 2 managers with different levels of championship experience and 2 sides with very different mentalities at the moment. We can already tell exactly how this game's going to go. Southampton will have a minimum of 60% of the ball. Preston will put a couple of crosses in the box and either look like scoring or nick a goal. And it's just whether Southampton can find some defensive solidity and take their chances. I'm going to go for Southampton to win it. And I'm sorry to Preston fans, because I do think you'll probably pick up a point on the balance of play. But Southampton have to hit form eventually. And I'm going to go by 2-1. But I'm not a confident man with that prediction. And well done to Preston. They had a brilliant weekend performance. Our penultimate game is between 2 more sides that got 1-0 victories last weekend. It is Stoke City versus Bristol City. Both sides in the top 6. Both started really well. Let's start with Mark Robins at Stoke because, look, he's done something that I think a lot of us wouldn't have expected. We saw the way he played at Coventry through the leagues. He took the team up playing aggressive attacking football at home. But he's done what a good manager does. He's adapted. It's not about this manager's boring or this one's exciting. Mark Robins has been both. It's what I always used to praise Nathan Jones for. He would adapt to the level at Luton. And he's picked the team up and he's made them a good counter-attacking side that are solid defensively, which is an incredible effort. Stoke City haven't been that for a long time. And look, they've got a joint best defence in the league. They're not scoring bundles of goals. And there will be some weeks where those fixtures start to go against them. And they start to draw or lose those games instead of winning them 1-0. But at the minute, they're clinging on. They're getting results. They were pretty poor against Pompey. They didn't create much at all. Relied on an own goal. Let's not be fooled. Pompey had enough chances to win a couple of games, get 3 or 4 goals, and it would have been a very different day. But 2 wins out of 3 playing Wrexham, Millwall and Pompey, especially the last 2 against teams that are so strong at home. To get 1 victory is a pretty good effort out of that. Not as good an effort, though, as the last week for Bristol City. 3 victories against Norwich, Southampton and Birmingham showed very different sides of their game, looked awful for half an hour against Southampton, went behind, showed fighting spirit to come back, looked great on the counter-attack. Against Birmingham and Norwich, more in this Birmingham game, breaking down a side who were fairly defensively set up but had a lot of the ball and were able to take their 1 chance. It was a really poor performance from Bristol City and they won 1-0. That is the sign of a team that is making progress. And I know the fans won't want to see it every week as they did against Birmingham and Norwich, but you've got to take it while it comes. And after a few more difficult results, a little bit of consistency is never a bad thing. And I don't know where to go because Stoke have been really solid at home this year. But Bristol City, as we discussed, they've done better against the stronger teams. They found a way. I'm going to go for Bristol City to nick it. I feel like I'm going for a few wild scorelines at the end here. I'm going to go for Bristol City by 2-1. I've got no logic to back that statement up. And the final game, again a 3 p.m. kickoff, is the Rob Edwards derby. If anyone remembers him managing Watford, it is Watford versus Middlesbrough. Borough stay in second. They keep the little unbeaten run going. And 7 points from the week, not a bad outcome. Albeit they'll be very frustrated by the Wrexham game because conceding that goal early really cost them. It was a game where Wrexham got the early goal and then sat in, became very hard to break down. And that's where Middlesbrough maybe have struggled slightly more this season. So it's imperative that they don't go behind too often. They haven't so far this season. That really cost them a victory in that game. In the end, though, they showed fight. They kept going. And Hayden Hackney, a quality player, popped up with a big goal. And having beaten Ipswich and Sheffield Wednesday, let's be fair, the Ipswich game could have gone a different way with the early penalty and things like that. But still, picking up points, doing well. It's a solid effort from Rob Edwards' side. And again, very solid defensively so far this year. That can't be said about Watford, who under Javi Gracia, 2 defeats and a victory now. Let's be honest, the Coventry game, I actually thought they played better in the first half than they got credit for. Yes, they got a late red card and let in 3 goals, but they had a couple of great chances. Goalkeeper made 2 brilliant saves. They missed opportunities to, at one point, probably make it 2-2. And in fairness, Coventry are a ruthless side who are beating most, and I think defensively, they gave them more of a scare than anyone else has in recent weeks. So I would say offensively, encouraging signs for Javi Gracia. They created chances against West Brom too. They've won their last 3 there at Vicarage Road, all by 2-1, but none of them against a side in form as much as Borough or as defensively solid as them. So I think I'm going to sit on the fence to finish here. The Championship's favourite scoreline is calling me, and I'm going to answer that call. 1-1 between Watford and Borough in a Rob Edwards derby to finish. So with that out the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for in match week 13. Away wins for Coventry, a surprise one for Bristol City as well. My only two across the weekend. Two Championship's favourite scorelines, Oxford v Millwall and Watford v Borough. And surprise wins perhaps for Sheffield United and Southampton, given their performances last weekend. But those are just my predictions for match week 13. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down in the comment section and give us your score predictions for all 12 matches this weekend. If you beat or match my overall score, as we said before, you will get a shout out on Sunday when we return at 6:30 to look ahead to a busy midweek in the EFL Championship. For now though, if you did enjoy this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on it, subscribe, turn that notification bell on to make sure you don't miss a thing. Enjoy the weekend of Championship action, and I'll see you back here on Sunday as we look ahead to another full midweek as this season is really getting going.